and I introduced the confidence karma principle. So I suppose I should give you a little bit of idea of my background and how it came about. By training, I'm a social psychologist, and my training is all about attitudes. That kind of informs my practice as a coach. So I work as a life coach. A few years ago, I was working with a group of mature students, and I realised I hadn't got the skills necessarily to. I'd been trained as a teacher. I'd got my psychology, and I hadn't necessarily got all the skills to deal with these part-time mature students. And so I went off and started to study coaching, and came back, and we ran some little confidence building sessions out of term time. And I eventually found out that I was kind of enjoying the confidence building more than the psychology, and kind of the curriculum was getting in the way of all the good stuff. And I was kind of quite amazed by just the small things that we could do to transform, that would transform people. And I also noticed the impact it had on my confidence. I've always considered myself a relatively confident person, but I noticed the more I started to put out there, and the more I focused on the other people and built their confidence, my confidence increased. And I suppose they see me as more confident, they react to me, that encourages me, and so it becomes a cycle. So that's the start of the idea of blending karma and confidence. Not two things that usually go together, unless you think about the literal definition of karma, which is action. And that also fits in with my idea of attitudes as a social psychologist. That attitudes are made up of thoughts, feelings, and actions. My previous book, which I shouldn't really be plugging here, is called Don't Wait for Your Ship to Come In, Swim Out to Meet It. And I got a review on Amazon, and it said, it was kind of quite an average review, but it said, this is an average self-help book. You actually have to do the exercises to get something out of the book. And I was quite amazed that someone would buy a book, they would expect maybe just to stroke the cover and the changes happen by osmosis, or they just read it and then their lives would suddenly change. There was no idea that action was involved at all. So when I wrote this book, I made sure that I put lots more exercises and lots more calls to action in. Each chapter in the book asks for a call to action. It's a karma call, and it asks you three things you could do to boost confidence in other people. Simple little things that you can do. In life, we get this idea that stress is all about great big events that happen to us and overwhelm us, where in reality it's like the tiny little events that happen to us, those little, the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. So we've got these little tiny hassles that stack up during the day, and we also get these little uplifts during the day. So people might pay us a compliment, people might just open a door for us, people might just smile at us. And at the end of the day, what we do is we kind of do a balance sheet. And if the uplifts outweigh the hassles, we've had a good day. If the hassles outweigh the uplifts, we've had a bad day. And in the book, what I focus on is doing small things so you can put uplifts out there for other people. And it also has a feel-good feeling as well. So I'm going back to the whole idea of social psychology, which is my field. There's a theory by Barbara Fredrickson, positive psychologist, who talks about broaden and build. And when we watch reality TV, we often see this version of confidence that's kind of like these wild, extravagant shows and dominating the airspace. And really what that is, it's not confidence at all. It's a performance built on top of stress. Because they're fired up, they're stressed, so they do the fake it till you make it stuff. And that's what we perceive often as confidence, and it's not. It's actually a form of aggression. Confidence actually comes from relaxation. So this is where confidence karma comes into its own in this bookshop, because there's lots of books on mindfulness, and mindfulness has become the big thing, and meditation. And really confidence is about being comfortable in your own skin, being present in the here and now. That's what confidence karma is about. That's what mindfulness is about. So the two go very well together. So if first we learn how to be comfortable in our own skin, and that shouldn't be, it should be a birthright, not an aspiration. And then we can pass that on to other people. That's the chain of confidence. And the reason for the broaden and build is that when we're stressed, we've almost got these blinkers on and we see things in totally black and white terms. Everything is fight or flight or freeze. Everything is very, very narrowly focused, and often we can't think straight. So in times of stress, we've got this idea that we can't make decisions because it's just fight or flight. Now with the broaden and build approach, if we take the stress levels down and we become more relaxed, what that helps us to do is tap into a broader range of our abilities, a broader range of cognitions, thought processes, emotions, because we're not just in survival anymore. We're actually in a thriving state. So there's a very good reason why all confidence should be based on relaxation. And after all, when you think about professional athletes who are the fastest, they can run the fastest, they can jump the highest, they are the excellent performers. And what they learn to do first is control their physiology. They take things down first before they psych themselves back up. So that's basically what the book is about. It shows us how we can, first of all, become more comfortable in our own skin, and then how we can project and how we can basically pass it on to other people. I've mentioned attitudes, and that is what my field is, attitudes. And there's something called psychological hardiness, and it's based on research that we can develop this buffering effect against change and against stress, and it's based on 3 attitudes. And one is commitment, and that's commitment to other people, that's a commitment to curiosity, that's a commitment to find out about the world, as opposed to alienation. I mean, I had a friend who talked about, he said, I need to find a partner. And I said, what do you do? He goes, well, I sit home most nights and, you know, I watch soap operas. And then the best will in the world, Miss or Mrs. Right or Mr. Right is not going to open the letterbox and shout, do you fancy a date? You've got to get out there and actually do something. So a commitment to other people, to connect with other people. If we look on, you've probably seen the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anybody who's done a training course has usually been inflicted with Maslow. And you see belonging, the esteem needs fall roughly in the middle, just above belongingness. So we've got belongingness needs, and then on top of that, esteem needs. We have to connect with other people. That's part of the self-esteem. Going back to the psychological hardiness, the other one is control. The other attitude is that we take control over what we have in our lives. We emphasize the control rather than emphasizing our powerlessness. So little things that we can seize, they emphasize our control. So you've all come here today, you've all made decisions, you've all had to plan, you've all had to get dressed. Those are all the building blocks of control. It sounds really simple, but when I'm working with people in workshops, I get them to rate their confidence on a scale from 0 to 10. And some of them will say 0, so I say, how have you got here? And we start to analyse the process of just simply getting from A to B, how complicated it is. I've come up from Birmingham today, and I've kind of thought, oh, I forgot how torturous this journey is. So I've, on the train, and I looked, it was the rush hour, so I thought, I'm not going to bother with the tube, I'm going to actually walk from Euston to here instead. So I made those decisions, I exercised control. The other attitude is, from the psychological hardiness, is challenge. Is that we reframe the issues we have in our life more in terms of challenges rather than as problems, and we don't emphasize just on the security and the comfort zones in our life. What we do is we actually look for small goals that can take us forward in some way. So in the book I cover the idea of simple goal setting, and the basic idea is a goal should stretch us a little bit. It should take us out of our comfort zone. And in the book I also mention contribution goals. What do we do to take things forward? One of the final things that I could mention is I've introduced in the book the concept of auto-prejudice. And that's the idea that low self-confidence is a form of prejudice, is that we kind of it's almost like an autobiography that we keep telling ourselves that we can't do stuff, and it becomes self-fulfilling. So auto-prejudice is literally a prejudice against the self. So my field was in prejudice, so simply what I did in the book, I've taken lots of discrimination reduction programs and distilled them into a 10-point list from psychology of things you can do to address the self-prejudice. So that, roughly in a nutshell, is what the confidence karma method is about. It's about first finding that stillness, finding that sense of comfort in your own skin. It's about relaxing. I remember the first time I experienced it properly, I was on a Greek island and I was sitting in a beautiful picturesque harbour, and I got my book there because I didn't want to look like I'd travelled alone. I didn't want to look like I was alone. And I suddenly realised, and I didn't get this from any spiritual book, I actually got this from Carrie Bradshaw in Sex and the City. And it's kind of, you know, when you're comfortable in your own skin, when you can go to a coffee shop and you can throw away the book, not this one, and you can just sit there, you can just own the space, and it doesn't matter. So I did this a few times at this particular harbour coffee shop, and I noticed that people started to come up to me and just chat and say hello. Didn't invite them. This one woman came up to me the second day, because I'm a creature of habit, and she'd photocopied this beautiful poem. She says, "I've seen you sitting there rather serenely, and I thought you'd like this beautiful poem." And I just thought, she'd just seen me, and I just thought little things started happening when I decided I didn't need the book anymore. I didn't need my notepad. I didn't need a phone. I could just sit there and own the space. So that's how it all started, being comfortable in my own skin. And because that's such a great feeling, the next logical step is, how do I pass it on to other people? So what the book does essentially is, it's a complete, I say it took me probably longer to live it than it did to write it. So you get all the shortcuts. So all the things I've discovered from my background in psychology, my trips on Greek islands, which I don't go on about too much, just a little taster. I don't describe the venues or anything. My background in teaching and coaching and drawing together all those strands. So you've got a complete confidence building package there. And like I said, every chapter it asks you, what do you intend to do? Now you've read this chapter, what 3 things do you do to pass on that sense of confidence to other people? And that's it in a nutshell. The question is, instilling confidence in others, does that mean setting an example? And the answer to that, simply that, is yes. Because if people see you as being calm, you've got to notice when you walk. I do this exercise with in my workshops, when I get people to just walk around the room and look into a space. And then I get them to make eye contact with each other in a neutral way. And then I get them to look away from each other and look into the space, and then back again. And I get them to look through people. I don't know whether you've been in that social situation where people just kind of look through you. Happens a lot in nightclubs. And then I get them to look at people to say that with the intention that you're going to be trouble. And then we go back to neutral. And it's the sense of what you bring to a room, it will actually have a massive impact. Even the shyest person brings something to a room. So you walk into the room, you don't make eye contact, you're very tense, you find people will tense up because they think, how do I handle this person? If somebody's very relaxed, so the idea in the book is truly confident people put other people at ease. So if you're in a room with someone and they're waving their arms about and showing you how confident they are, and you're going, whoa, too much, it's probably not confidence. If they're relaxed, that's setting an example. You probably will feel more relaxed and you'll probably want to interact. And also the little idea about is passing, looking for opportunities where you can pass on little moments. So this is my confession, is that I always aim to be really nice to people, especially in coffee shops, because I love coffee shops. And I just ask people, not because I'm manipulative, it's just that I genuinely like people, so I ask people about the day. how's your day? Or if they're busy, I comment on they look busy. And I get loads of free coffees and cakes and stuff. So I haven't mentioned that in the book, maybe the next edition, but there's a certain karma in that if you are kind of acknowledge people, if people are doing a good job and you just simply acknowledge that or compliment, that can make somebody's day, that can change someone's day. So that's a simplest way to build confidence. Unfortunately, it's not great for the waistline, in my case. So that's why I walk everywhere from Euston to here. Okay, the first one is, I was asked, what is a simple exercise? So I do this with all my clients, and I often get people come to me who have said they've got to make some life changes and they're stressed, and they say, I haven't got time to relax. And really that's exactly when you need to relax. So I like to think of, if you think about when you play a piece of music, we often think about the notes, but we don't think about the spaces in between. So if you take away all the spaces, then you get a siren. And that's what happens when you're stressed. So the simplest thing I say, I developed this kind of 2-minute stress buster, and it's just 7 deep breaths in through the nose, out through the mouth, 3 times a day. And my challenge is usually, if you can't take up 6 minutes a day, then you probably need to be spending an hour a day. If you can't find 6 minutes a day, there's something seriously out of kilter. So that's the basic one. There are things in, like when you're in the shower as well of a morning. So I'm a big fan of not taking up too much time to do these things and looking for the spiritual in simple things, or the making a connection. So I imagine the shower is kind of like a rainbow shower. So having a shower of a morning becomes a visualization, and it's kind of setting me up for the day. I've got things like a rise and shine breath in the book, which kind of, some day, I struggle with the latent, sort of the shorter days and the dark, and so I need this desperately. So it's basically, you start with this particular stretch and a breath while you're in bed, lying down. Then the second phase is you actually sit up to do it, and then the third phase is you get out and stand and you do it. And if you want to go back to bed, then you can, but usually it's enough just to get you out of bed. So I'm building like simple little things like that, because if we are more relaxed, because the simple thing what we do is if simplest thing I can ask you to do now to relax you is invite you just to close your eyes. So if you just close your eyes and just take those few breaths. So in through the nose, out through the mouth. Just 7 deep breaths. And perhaps on the out breath, just either mentally or out loud, just say karma. Now the reason that works, and that will take stress down, is for 2 reasons. Number 1 is the breathing, because the brain works on the principle of congruence. So if the brain sees shallow breathing, it tells the brain stress. If the brain recognises deep breathing, that must mean relaxation. If we close our eyes, we automatically trigger more alpha waves in the brain. Those are the waves that our brain triggers just before we go to sleep. So those two, that simple little thing, and I do that if I've got a talk to give, or if I've got an interview, or often when I'm working back to back with clients, I will just do that in between each client, just to kind of ground myself. So that's the first thing. Very simple exercises that we can do and build them into routine. Drinking more water is incredibly important. If we feel dehydrated, we actually are more stressed. So simple stuff like that. Not necessarily the 2 litres. The 2 litres was just made up so to get people to drink a lot. It's kind of as much as you need, the new research suggests. But to drink more water than probably, like my uncle, 1 glass every Boxing Day, when he's got indigestion. So it needs to be a little bit more regular than that. And the second question was, what's the difference or the connection between confidence and self-love? And I think, well, there's certainly deep connection between confidence and happiness. I mean, we can demonstrate those. You look at the research and there's a strong connection between self-love, and I suppose it comes down to what is self-love if not just kind of feeling comfortable in your own skin, not having thoughts intrude telling that you're not good enough, or that wasn't good enough, or those automatic nagging, automatic negative thoughts that we get into our head. So a little technique to deal with those is just to acknowledge. So if you've got these persistent thoughts that kind of pop into your head, the tendency is to want to interact with that thought and argue with it. And if you're anything like me, you argue with yourself, and I always lose. So the idea is that you connect with that thought and just say hello to the thought. It sounds crazy, but just say hello to the thought and just name the thought. Thought about not being good enough, thank you very much. And just sometimes enough to acknowledge the thought is enough to make it go. It's kind of almost like a warped security system that we don't want to step out of our comfort zone, we don't want to make fools of ourselves, so we have these thoughts intrude upon us to tell us that we're not good enough or we're going to fail. Simple start is just to name those thoughts. So I think there's probably a deep connection between self-love and confidence. It starts with feeling comfortable in your own skin, and it's totally non-judgmental. So the idea, you put all the paraphernalia away. You don't need your book, you don't need your phone, you just sit there, you look at the beautiful scenery. Sometimes not always beautiful, but there's beauty in everything, and you just own that space. And I guess that's kind of the basis of self-love. So it's totally non-judgmental. You have every right to be here. And if you're anything like me, when you go to Greece, the lovely thing is that you can always tell people who've just arrived, because they'll go into coffee bars and they'll order a coffee, and it's 10 minutes, it's gone, and they're running off. And you can tell the people who've got into the Greek spirit, because you basically should take about 83 minutes apparently to drink a coffee. That's what's been observed, 80 something minutes. And when you got to the point, you can just sit there and it just doesn't bother you anymore. I've actually sat in one cafe from 11 till 5. And I meant to go to the beach, but in the end it was just too nice, and so when you get to that state where you don't have to rush about, drinking a coffee isn't functional, having a meal isn't functional, sitting in the park isn't just, it's all little special moments. That confidence is about, one theory is confidence is about having deep connection with a spiritual connection. And is there something like that in the book? There's a whole chapter in the book on mindfulness and meditation, and it is about connecting with yourself, and it is about connecting with this very simple thing that researchers found is that when, in order to boost self-esteem, it was found that people just go for a walk. So they did research and found out self-esteem is boosted just by going for a walk in nature. And I think part of that is being connected or recognising there's something greater out there. And also it's the relaxation. So it isn't an overtly spiritual book. It has, I think the approach is spiritual because it's about connecting with people, it's about passing on good stuff, and not elevating yourself at someone else's expense, and it's about connection. But there's not an explicit spiritual theme to the book in that sense, that I don't talk about anything about a higher power. It's about connecting with yourself in the here and now. So in that way it's quite secular, but there isn't anything in the book that would contradict, I suppose, my background. Going way back when I was about 20, I got really interested in Taoism, and I was really interested in the Taoist perspective, that you can become a Catholic Taoist, a Buddhist Taoist, a Christian Taoist. I don't know whether you could become a Satanist Taoist. I dare say you could. But it's the idea that Taoism kind of fits. And so when I write, that's the approach I've got, that it wouldn't contradict. So I do a meditation in there. So you might have people say, well, meditation is just that, it's all Eastern. But I just have people chanting, instead of a supreme mantra, I just get people chanting the word one, just the number one. because then that's totally secular, but it has the same effect. Or I get people doing a breathing exercise, and on the out breath they just chant the word karma. It has a progressive quality that it makes you feel calmer. Any of that can be import to any kind of religious practice. So it's what you might find, and I'm a big fan of the idea that I haven't finished the book, is that I recognise the reader finishes the book. So if you buy the book and you take away the book and you bring something to it, that's you kind of writing the final chapter for yourself. So I feel there always should be that sense that a book shouldn't be, I kind of think that I haven't finished it, I kind of abandoned it at a certain point, and then it's up to the reader. So it's a complete course, but everyone will add their experience, and that can include spirituality as well. Two people in a relationship, one has decided to dump on the other person, and that impacts on someone's confidence. So essentially you need to address it as a unit. So it's not just her, it's actually first addressing, you know, almost as a system. He has obviously got an issue. I'm guessing that there's a sort of self-esteem issue there. And one of the easiest things we're taught, I mean, I suppose playground bullying, is that if we feel bad about ourselves, we pick on somebody else and we feel a little bit better. Not that I ever did that at school, but that's essentially what's happening. He's actually boosting his own self-esteem from by pushing her down. So number one is to address him, and it's actually he needs to first of all relax more. There's obviously stress there, and from her position, we often see these books that talk about toxic people, and the first response is always just to ditch all toxic people from your life. I'd have no one in my life because somebody is toxic at some point to someone else, and that's the wonderful thing about being human. But when it's an intense relationship, that's when it can be very destructive. So from her to actually decide what she considers to be acceptable behaviour, and to actually communicate that to him.